In this video, I'm going to show you how to install factory-style fog lights on this 2008 to 2010 F-250. Now your kit will come with a bunch of wiring and it might look scary, but it's actually not that bad, and I'll show you how to do it. Let's get started. Now the first thing I want to do is decode this wiring harness with you so that you understand what is going on. So once you unravel it, you'll notice that this relay is kind of the starting point of the whole harness. That doesn't mean it's the end of the harness, but this is where everything kind of stems from. So let's start with the red wire. This will be your main power. So this end right here will have to be directly connected to your battery terminal. With that out of the way, the next two wires you'll see are these black and white wires that join together into a wire loom. And these are actually the wires that feed the fog lights. So this is pretty self-explanatory. The plugs are already attached to them. You don't have to worry about this. We'll move that out of the way. With these two out of the way, you'll notice two more wires here. Out of the white and black harness connector here for the fog lights, you'll notice that out of one pin will come another black wire. This is going to be your main ground. You're going to want to ground this to the chassis or directly to the negative battery terminal. The last wire is going to be this white one, which is long, and that is because this actually is the wire that leads to your switch, which is going to be mounted on the dash inside the vehicle. So basically this is your signal wire. When you press that switch, this signal will be transferred to the relay. The relay will close, send power to the fog lights, and activate them. Now the switch will also have a power and ground, which you will have to connect, and that is because the switch has a light on it, and the light will indicate whether it's on or off. These are not drawing a lot of power at all, so what I will do is I will ground this on the inside on the chassis, and for this we will tap into a fuse on the fuse box, and I will show you why I want to do it that way. You don't have to. However, if you connect this to constant power, you will be able to turn on the fog lights at any time, which also brings the risk of forgetting them on. So let's say you turn them on and it's not completely dark out, you don't notice, they will not shut off. If I connect this to an accessory powered fuse, they will shut off as soon as I turn that key off. And that's how I want to wire them in. So again, optional. This is just how I'm doing it, and I'm showing you the process. If you want to do it differently, go for it. Having said all that, let's start some wiring. Now to bring this white wire into the cab, it doesn't actually have an end to it. It's pinned in on the relay and it's pinned in on the connector for the switch. You can cut it and splice it back together, but I'm going to show you how to unpin it from this and feed it into the truck so that we can actually get to it on the other side, unless you want to try and feed this whole connector through, but that might be a little bit, well, a lot more difficult than trying to feed a little tiny wire through. Also, you might have a different type harness. I know these fog lights come with different style harnesses. Some are actually split in the middle and they have a connector, but whatever you might have, this wire needs to go through the firewall. So let me show you how to unpin it. You're going to want to grab a straight pick and feed it through the back side of this connector. So we're aiming for the white wire. Pop it up like this. This will unlock the locking tabs that hold on the wires. And at this point, it's not unlocked yet, but you do have to pull a little bit and it'll snap out of place. And there you go, that's depinned. Obviously, leave these in. This harness is now separated from the main harness. We can put this inside the truck and we'll feed this through the firewall. So here we are under the hood. My battery is missing. Disregard that, it's on the charger because this truck has been sitting for a while. I do have the other battery in and connected, so we do have power. This is the terminal that we're going to want to connect the main power to. Optionally, you could connect the ground here, but I think I'm going to do something a little different. I'll show you later. Basically, what we're aiming for is something similar to this. This is actually a different power wire here. This is obviously not the one that we're dealing with. And if you look behind the coolant reservoir here, between the master cylinder and the fender, you'll see that there's a main harness boot right there. It's that large black boot with a bunch of wires coming out of it. And right underneath it, or to the right of it, you can see someone has already run a wire through it. So I'm actually going to use that same hole because it's already made, but that is typically where you would want to run your wire through. You don't want to drill a hole in the firewall, which I can actually show you an example right there. that was previous wiring, and that is a really bad idea, especially if you don't put a grommet in. The wire can rub up against the metal firewall, it can wear the insulation, then it can arc. You can also get water inside, and of course it's a firewall for a reason. If there's a fire, now you have an open hole where fire can get in, smoke, debris, anything. Not a good idea overall. You want to go through a rubber boot, or if you make your own hole, put a rubber boot in. Make sure it's a fireproof one. Regardless, I'm going to reach for that hole down there. It's impossible for me to show you while I do it, but I'm going to show you once it's through, and then I'll show you inside the cab where that leads. All right, so here's my white wire, which is supposed to go to the switch. All right, now let's go inside the cab and pull it through. Now inside the cab, if you look right between the parking brake pedal and the regular brake pedal, you'll see that is the large grommet with the wiring harness, and this is our wire. Perfect. Now that we have that pulled through, back in the engine bay, I want to route all the wires. That way they are properly secured, and so that I know how much to pull this into the cab, because I don't want it hanging out here. I would rather have extra wire inside the cab where I can tie it up and tuck it away next to other wires, as opposed to here in the engine bay where things can get hot, in the way, broken. It's not a great environment for wires. So let's figure out where to mount this fuse. Now the fuse and the relay, I'm actually just going to tuck behind here, and then I'll run the wires for the fog lights that come from the relay right behind this panel here. I know you can't see it, but this is basically the battery tray / overflow tank. It's all built into the same thing together. We have our ground wire here, and our power wire is plenty long to reach to the battery terminal. So I think this is a great location for it. Over here, the wire comes up along the fender on the radiator support, and it is tucked behind the battery tray here. So if you keep going down with it, you can actually pull it out through the headlight mounting hole. Go ahead and pull it through all the way. Now the reason I didn't completely mount the relay yet is because I need to make sure we have enough wire length to drop this down to the fog light. One wire will be longer than the other. That's because this will go to the passenger side, this stays on the driver's side, so obviously you need one longer than the other. I'm going to continue running it behind the headlight because I don't want this to be in the way. This is going to be permanently mounted here, so I want it running along the factory wiring. All right, pulling it down from underneath the headlight. Pull both wires through. Okay, now the wires are down into the bumper. Let's just make sure that everything here is not under tension. So basically the way I ran this harness, just to recap, down along the headlight, goes up and in between the fender and the battery tray / overflow tank. It's all molded into one, and it goes right back there to the relay. I like to keep wires nice and neat, so what I did is I put the fuse right on top of this relay. I'm going to use a wire tie, just wire tie these wires together. That way they don't get in the way of anything. I'm not going to wire tie this ground in though, or the main power. I want those out. And cut off the excess. All right, now I'm just going to go ahead and tuck this in here where I had it earlier. Now all of the wiring is a lot cleaner. Now we have to connect our main power wire over here. So remove the 10mm nut on the battery terminal. I have another wire here, and the way, actually I have two wires. The way you want this to work is you want the thickest wire on first, and then you go down in size until you get to your thinnest accessory. This is my thinnest wire here, so I'm going to stack these on like that. Put the mounting nut back on. Make sure it's all clean here. Nothing is corroded for me, so I'm good. There's no debris in the way of it making a good connection. Once you have it bottomed out, give it a quick snug. Of course, your battery would still be connected at this point. You don't have to disconnect your battery for this. Like I said, I still have my other battery in. This one's just off to charge. Okay, so now we are wired in power-wise. Let's ground it out. This is the ground wire right here. Comes out of the relay. And what I want to do is I'm going to tuck it underneath here. And I'm noticing that there's an accessory wire here that someone has already grounded to the firewall with a self-tapper. So I'm just going to take that out, add this to it, and ground it out there. You can go anywhere else you want. You can pick any bolt that grounds out to the body. I can see a couple threaded bolts over there. That might be an option. Just make sure that if you have paint on it, scrape off the paint, put the wire on, and then coat it on top of it so it doesn't rust once the paint is scraped off. Again, for me, I'm going to pick this Phillips head screw here, and I'm going to ground my fog lights right there. The same rule applies here. Thickest wire first, thinnest wire last. Here's my screw. I'm going to add this over like that. I'm holding the wire in place to make sure it stays in there. Make sure it's nice and snug. Back to the inside, let's repin the white wire. Remember, it didn't go next to the red one or on the end. It went right in the middle. Make sure that the cutout on the pin faces up towards the hooks. That's what locks it in. Had a very light clicking noise. That's how I know it's in. But obviously, if you pull on it, it shouldn't easily pop out. Now, take these tabs, flip them down, and press them. Now your wires are repinned. The next step is going to be to find a spot to mount this switch. I'm going to go right here. It comes with some double-sided tape, but first I need to figure out where I'm going to run my wires. So I might actually want to put it either sideways or upside down. Otherwise, if I put it upright like this, the wire doesn't really have anywhere to go close by, and I want as little amount of wires as possible hanging out of the dash. If I come over here, I can pop out this panel, and with it popped off, I'm going to feed my wire down and through, and this is going to basically make it come out the bottom. There it is. Before I close this panel, I'm just going to situate my switch here, peel this off, and I'm going to mount it right here. Press it on for a few seconds. That way the glue can bite onto the plastic. With this in place, let's close this back up, tuck the wire in here. I'm going to go ahead and connect this switch to the main harness. And now we just have to run our wires. This can be ground out to the chassis anywhere. I already have a location picked out. I'm going to show you. And the red wire, we have to run to the passenger side of the truck and get into the fuse box with it. So in order to ensure I have enough wire, I ran the red wire, which is this power wire that I was talking about, up along the original harness that runs in the dash, up above the steering column, around there, down underneath the cup holder. And, well, this is where I stopped to show you, but let's run it through the other side. Okay, pull it through here. I'm going to tuck it up above the air vent. That way it's not in the way of any shoes. And if you remove this cover, there's the fuse box. So we made it. So I looked it up, and this 15 amp fuse right here is actually for the fog light relay feed. So you can see right here, it's already wired in. And if we flip the page, you can see that number 21 is exactly the second one on the lower side underneath that relay, which is number 48. In your fog light kit, you'll have one of these fuse taps. Basically, you take out that 15 amp fuse, you put this in, you put the 15 amp fuse right in this open slot, and then this 5 amp fuse that is provided will feed your switch. So let's do that. Grab some needle nose pliers. It'll be easier to remove the fuse that way. Take that out, put it into the open slot of the fuse tap. Make sure you press it down all the way. Then take your fuse tap and position it in here however it fits best. Okay, make sure you press it in all the way. And all we have to do is crimp this end to this end, and then we'll be all set. This wire comes pre-stripped on the end here, but I'm actually going to take out a little bit more. And what I like to do is give it a couple twists, and then I like to fold the end of the wire in half to make it a larger contact area when I put it into the connector over here. Slide it in all the way. Take your crimpers. I'm crimping a blue connector, so I'm going to line it up with the blue mark and squeeze it down as tight as you can. Release it, and now obviously, as always, check it, pull on it. It doesn't come out. That means you have a good connection there. So now we need to tuck the wire up out of the way. Now let's put this cover back. On the driver's side, I need to ground out the switch with this wire. I'm going to choose to go on this bolt right here because it makes a good connection on the lower dash support frame here. So take a 7mm socket and remove this bolt that holds your OBD2 connector in. You don't have to remove it all the way because this connector is slotted. So if you just loosen it, you can slide it in at the top here. Make sure it's out of the way of the brake pedal, and then tighten it back up. Make sure it's nice and snug. That makes a good connection, and then we'll just tuck all the wires away. And now looking from underneath, you can see that these are our wires that we wired down into the bumper. And right here you'll see a plastic bracket. Now again, I don't have any fog lights on this, so I have to remove this cover, and this is where the fog lights will bolt up. If you have fog lights already, you wouldn't be following this whole video. But regardless, take out these two 8mm bolts, and there's going to be another one up top that I'll show you in a second. If these bolts break or they're in very poor condition, you're going to want to get new ones, because this is how you're going to secure the fog light. And there's that last one right up there. Go ahead and take this out. You'll notice that this whole assembly now will have a hard time fitting in here. You can either remove this large brace, or it might be easier to remove the fog light off of its bracket, slide the fog light in, slide the bracket in, and remount them. Whatever you want to do. If you wanted to take the fog light off of the bracket, you'd have to remove the adjuster bolt just with a Phillips head screwdriver. And then there's two push clips at the top that the fog light swivels in. Also take a Phillips head screwdriver, remove the center, and then pop the clip out. I'm going to choose to go this route because it'll be easier than removing this whole bracket and getting it to line up perfectly again. There we go. You can slide this in here, and then you can take your bracket, slide this up here easily, grab the fog light on the other side, and just to secure it temporarily, I'm going to start the adjuster screw back in onto the fog light, and I'm going to put in the two push clips on the side. Take the center of those push clips, push it in, and now we'll just thread it in all the way. And finally the adjuster, bring it about halfway in, and obviously you'll have to adjust the fog lights afterwards to aim the beam correctly, but just kind of eyeball it. Okay, stop right there, and now I'm going to take the top mounting bolt for this bracket, line it all up, and it will be a little bit more difficult to see the top at this point, but line it up and thread it in by hand to make sure it doesn't cross thread, and put the bottom in. Once all three are in, I'm going to snug them up. That way I make sure that it's correctly lined up, and then we'll route the wire on this side, and the process on the other side will be the exact same, so I won't show you that, but I will show you the final result. Let's do the same to the bottom. Now for the driver's side, take the shorter of the two wires and plug in your light bulb. This one for me does not have a lot of excess wire hanging out, so there's nothing for me to tie out of the way. If for some reason for you it's longer, go ahead and tie it. Now let's just route the passenger side wire. I'm going to bring it up and above the frame rail over here. Pull it through all the way, above the intercooler hose, through the lower radiator brackets, or intercooler brackets. This will allow me to just leave it here without having it tied out of the way in too many places. And now on the other side, you can see I already installed the fog light. Grab the wire, and it just barely makes it, which is perfect because that means there's not going to be a lot of slack on the wire for it to hang down and get caught on things. So connect it, and at this point, let's test them out. And there we go. They both work perfectly. All you have to do now is adjust the beam so that it is parallel with the lowest part of where the headlight shines. So make sure your headlights are adjusted properly, and then just lift or lower the fog lights from the mounting screw or the adjustment screw that I showed you earlier to aim them properly however you want to. There you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.